All right, welcome back everybody to Lilicrow's Tournament. Today we will be commentating BS versus CCB. My name's Music Man, and I'm being joined by. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Um, hey everybody. My name is Tony, and today I'll also be commentating for you. Um, yeah, I hope y'all are doing great.
Yeah, so we have CCB versus BS, and I believe we're going to get initiated with the coin flip soon. And I do know that CCB, I was actually commentating the last matchup that they ended up playing against Eli's team, and I know that they have a really solid sculptor main on their team. So if um, CCB ends up getting to pick the first map, I can see them going for something. There are three maps that I think would probably be primarily considered. First one would be Eversleeping. We saw that dominant display during the last matchup. Red Church is also a very, very solid sculptor map, and probably the third one would be Chinatown. Chinatown is maybe not exactly like the strongest map for sculptor specifically, but it's one of those maps that if you don't have a really great hunter for it, which I know that BS, I believe Burb is hunting on BS at least round one. I'm not positive about that, but I know that Burb is a Mad Eyes main, and Mad Eyes can sometimes be somewhat rough on Chinatown. So sometimes you go for these picks not just for the matchup that your own hunter has, but to try to counter whatever the opposing team has to offer. So we'll get that right in a second, I think. Oh, gotcha. Okay. Anything that you'd like to say about that?
Um, well, Red Church is a really solid map, I feel like, and it's honestly, in my opinion, just a really easy map to transition in and kite in because it's just a big kiting area, really. So I'm really excited to see some Red Church kites.
Yeah, and we're seeing already the first two bands are Antiquarian and Coordinator. Coordinators has been increasingly trendy nowadays as a first round band, especially if you're planning on going opera singer. The first two locks have been Gardner and Merc, and this is slightly unusual that you would kind of lock your rescuer second. I mean, not completely unreasonable, but um, Gardner has been a character that you play a lot round one. A lot of times you have Gardner eat up the global ban here. Typically you lock in your rescuer third just so that you don't have to permanently lock a rescuer, but they decide to lock Merc in second to make sure that they are able to get that mercenary pick in. And we see the next ban is going to be Arrow, which is something that can be banned a lot on Moonlit, but it's kind of interesting that we see that banned on Red Church. Yeah, go ahead.
Um, honestly, um, Gardner and Merc, I feel like those are somewhat solid picks, and I think we'll see some great gameplay from that. Uh, I'd like to see some really, really good struggling out because you know how Gardner is, and hopefully we get to see some really smart plays. Arrow on Red Church, I feel like might have not been the best band because there's so many obstacles in Red Church, and Arrow mains really struggle in maps that aren't as open in a way.
Yeah.
But
So the
he's
big thing would be when you ban Aeroplanus on round one, you free up the survivors to lock in either a priestess or a seer, and I expect to see either one or the other to come out here. Usually, what you want to have on Red Church is that you can have a supportive character that takes the middle spawn there. So I would expect to see Oh, they lock in Ento, which works all the same. Yeah, you usually want to have a supportive character. Kind of unusual if you're expecting to go against a Sangria. Not so bad if you're thinking that you might be going against a Gamekeeper. Ento is typically regarded to be somewhat of a counter to Gamekeeper, especially in the kind of way the meta stands right now. But against Sangria, sometimes Ento can be slightly suboptimal, but again, it's all about the survivor's comfort level with each character, and it also comes to individual prep.
Hmm. Yep. Uh, and so generally, I feel like is a pretty good pick, but like you said, against Sangria and hunters that exceed in getting fast hits in on her bees, and just in general can destroy them really fast, I feel like she might struggle against Gamekeeper. I don't, well, obviously, I don't think we're seeing a Gamekeeper, but uh, he can just drag her. I think if she's still on her bees and didn't let them go at the time.
Well, the
So
way the bees work with Gamekeeper is that the Gamekeeper, a lot of times, the reason why Ento is considered to be a counter for Gamekeeper is that the bees actually act as a wall for the hook, so it can be sort of like a free body block, if you will, for one of the hooks. The hooks will collide with the bees, but they won't go through the bees.
hmm, well then, that was just a really good pick.
And we
And
see the last survivor locked is Journalist, which is kind of going quite off meta now. Usually, if you go for that second rescuer, you might go for the Wildling. Not necessarily on this map, but if you're going to go double rescuer, that's a lot of times what you do. Journalist is one of those rescuers that, yes, she is a rescue character, and she can do solid rescues against especially single hit hunters. But Journalist can sometimes be a little bit fragile in the early game, which is something that you don't exactly want to see a lot of times from the rescuer. But again, we'll see if CCB has some specific prep that they have been looking for in here. They ended up banning. I think that was. Oh, what did they ban? Yeah, they ended up banning the Acrobat, and that's when they locked in the Journalist. Acrobat's also good on this map, so that's a very reasonable ban there. And yeah, the traits have been locked, and we'll see. Yeah, it's going to be a Singer. Okay, yeah, and Singer is very, very strong. Merc and Gardner are both pretty decent bans here, but entomologist and journalist can sometimes struggle against this character, so it'll be very interesting to see what they do with this matchup. Red Church is typically regarded to be a very, very small map, so this might come into play if they end up getting the Sangria sometimes gets an early down. You can kind of pressure the Sangria to go out if you try to go for the Cypher Rush against her because of the Cyphers are so much closer together than a map like Eversleeping, maps like Chinatown, kind of some of like the relatively bigger maps that sometimes the Cypher Rush can be a little bit slower on. But again, we'll just have to see what this Opera has in store for this Survivor team.
yeah, uh, all I really have to say is generally this team is pretty good. And in some situations, Gardiner, I feel like Gardiner against the Singer can be balanced because Gardiner has her bubble and Singer is really fast. So I guess it just really depends on the player. Um, I actually see more often than not that journalists can exceed in situations that involve opera singer because the palette stuns and body blocking her after images provide, I think, really help. But that's just me though. And if played correctly, Enzo could help too.
Yeah, so we see kind of the way I kind of view this setup. This is definitely a high risk, high reward setup, especially when you go for a setup that you have more than one rescuer in. Because if the Sangria ends up spotting out either the gardener or the entomologist, the decoding will also be slower with those characters in the comp. But you should be able to get consistent rescues out of it. So it's kind of a trade off where you get there. Um, but when you choose to have journalists as opposed to first officer, you do allow the Sangria to potentially have one more chase target that also has slower decoding. Now, I do believe we're going to see, yeah, we're seeing double tide here with the mercenary and the journalist here. The entomologist has windows, but I believe the entomologist had flywheel, but the gardener had windows. So we probably will expect to see, yeah, I was going to say, the support character is going to spawn in the middle, and the gardener is going to spawn up top, and this is a pretty typical spawn here. Now, when the Sangria ends up spawning up here, if the Cypher at Wedding doesn't spawn, then the one at Top Broken is going to be blocked. And a lot of times you make it so the Mercenary is forced to go all the way from Reception to Middle Broken to start decoding. And the reason why the Mercenary can't transition to Graveyard from there is because of the fact that the Journalist will likely get the first kite in this sort of setup. So I think this we'll have to see. It's going to be all about the controls for this Sangria. Anything else you'd like to add?
Um. Oh, well, I I think you're right. Yeah, I think that's journalist. Journalist is first chase. I'm hoping to see some really good use of after images here because it could really benefit the team if this kite is extended as long as possible.
Yeah,
Because I've noticed that Sangria does not succeed in situations where ciphers are just being upped and outed, and she can't really do much about it unless it's teleport, which is limited because it disables most of her chair camping potential.
yeah.
So,
And so the Journalist ended up eating a really early hit there. We see some play setting up these after images so that if the journalist ends up vaulting back, they'll have to eat that hit there. Missing a critical dash there. We're going to see Orpheus has been deployed there. Some major things to kind of come out of this kite. That God Palette at this kind of middle area here. Ends up getting the swing through Orpheus there, and that is going to be quite a good timing for a down, especially on a journalist there, the rescue character. So that pretty much forces the mercenary to go. And we notice that this opera is not carrying wanted order, so there's no chance of being able to kind of see where that rescue is coming through. And I think we see the Gardeners actually making their way for the rescue. Gardener is one of those characters that a lot of times works out as a rescue. We see Ento potentially setting up bees for support. Of course, the opera singer is going to knock them down. Now, we're going to expect to see the Gardener prepare her bubble before going in for the rescue, and that is going to make it so that it's going to be a free rescue. Even though it's without tide, this is going to be a farm, but this is an all-right position for the opera singer to be, being able that they ended up getting the rescue right off the chair. Being that the gardener had to go for the rescue, that does slightly slower the decoding there. So the gardener has to transition in for the rescue and then out back for the cipher. And yeah, I think we are going to see the mercenary come in for the second rescue. Anything that you'd like to add here?
um, as an operaman myself, I I really believe that Gardner should have attempted more of a baiting to hit the chair rescue. Because Opera really exceeds in situations where you rescue and she's not in attack recovery, so she can just dish out hits, and that's bad for your team because then she after the person who's on chair dies, that's just another easy chase target for our Opera here. So if journalist manages, yes, exactly. If journalist got down, so now after journalist gets chaired, Merc is
Yeah, and
gonna
the
get
Sangria is
chaired.
going to go ahead and chair Mercenary here. This is all right. Journalist isn't going to pick up before they're able to go back. And we did see a fantastic blink there, kind of going back to the blink. Excellent controls on the dashes to be able to catch up. And perhaps a slightly risky blink, but it ended up paying off really big dividends here. We're going to see the Gardener transition for that next rescue. And yeah, this
Uh,
journalist is dead on chair, so it might be in the survivor's best interest to let the mercenary kind of sit down for a little while. And the gardener will perhaps attempt another rescue. It does look like Ento is going to turn this into a one cipher remaining scenario, and yeah, this is going to be quite a nice position for this Hunter here.
If they can turn this game around, yes, I think they have a high chance of turning this game around. If Merc doesn't, yes.
And they ended
Wait,
up actually getting the pop off, which is going to make it so that there are 4 survivors up at the pop. Now that was kind of the risky move, going to chair the mercenary there while the journalist was dead on chair. It was definitely a playable move to have the journalist there, but yeah, ended up having to go back for the journalist. But I believe the other 3 survivors will be at the gate. I believe this gate here is open. Yeah, so that's going to be a 3 survivor escape
oh my
for round
god,
1.
it's amazing. Um,
And that is going to be a beautiful start for LX there, giving their Hunter. Or wait, is. Oh, I'm getting confused. Usu. Oh, the CCB
it's
were the survivors.
CCB.
Never
Yeah,
mind. Beautiful start for CCB. Now LX is going to put the pressure on their survivor team to end up getting a win here. And it's going to be very difficult. I know that they're going to be up against a Sculptor main that ended up. Yeah, it's 3 points for CCB. I got that confused for a second. Don't mind me.
it's
But
fine.
yeah, we're gonna see if the survivors will be able to return against the Sculptor main. Anything else you'd like to add on that matchup?
Um, I'm sorry, but who did you say the next matchup teams were gonna be?
Yeah,
Oh wait,
so pretty
wait.
sure
Oh,
LX had the. I'm confusing myself.
I am too.
Oh yeah. Okay, CCB's hunting next. Yeah, they have Zach playing, and Zach ended up having a really nice showing in last week's matchup, where they ended up going Sculptor, and I know Eli and Psyche were playing in the Survivors, and they ended up getting a really nice 4K during round 1. But if you decide to go with the Sculptor, I think we will expect that the Survivors will try to go for some sort of counter to that. I know that Zach has a very nasty Geisha and a very nasty Sculptor, so we're just going to see if that kind of comes out here. We have Antiquarian and Mercenary. Kind of interesting that you're going to ban the Antiquarian early, because typically Sculptor doesn't necessarily struggle against Antiquarian so much, which may lead to the idea that Zach may pull out the Geisha here round 1, especially on a map like Red Church, when you only need to get a tie to win the round. So I believe that Geisha will actually be a very safe bet to go for on this round 1 here, especially on this map, because this map is very tie oriented, and it's very tough to win on. But yeah, so CCB having a very nice early lead here.
Um,
Is there something you'd
yeah.
like to add there?
Yeah. Um, Generally, I wanted to say that, um, as you said, Zach Scala seems to be very nicely from what I heard. I didn't watch the match, but I'm gonna take your word for it. Um, Generally, I feel like this just depends more on play style, I guess, and what serves we have, because I've noticed recently that Gala is more of like a hunter you can mind game if you play well enough. So hopefully we see some good comebacks. We see some really good comebacks from the serves, and we're able to see a lot of counter from both factions. And Geisha on Red Church is my worst nightmare personally, in like a Hunter way, because I mean Hunter and I hate playing her on Red Church. But I'd really like to see good Geisha on Red Church, so that's generally what I'm hoping Zach picked.
Yeah, so we're going to see the first two survivors getting locked in here, and being that Antiquarian Mercenary were the first two banned, it'll be interesting to see what they decide to go for Survivor Comp. We may end up seeing actually a relatively more risky team. Okay, we're going to see Lawyer and Aeroplanus being the first two locks here. I believe that this is actually a really strong choice by the survivors because they end up needing to go for the win, so they end up going for a few more of these characters that do have a lot of like kind of rebound potential. Of course, Lawyer, when he's fully fed, can be a very decent kiter and end up getting decoding if the hunter doesn't end up chasing there. Typically, you spawn your Lawyer up at the top shack, so I think we could expect to see that in the match, and you'd spawn your Aeroplanus. You have the choice between the area between Graveyard and Backgate, or you can spawn them at Reception. It depends on what you decide to lock in. Whether you decide you want to make your Aeroplanus the kiter or the rescuer. So it'll be very interesting to see what the survivors try to do for that kind of mentality there. And it looks like they are going to... Female Dancer was the ban and Gravekeeper was the next pick. So they actually will have another rescuer. So this kind of leads me to believe that Aeroplanus will kind of spawn in that Graveyard Backgate area. And Gravekeeper is going to be spawned at Reception there because that is typically where you spawn the rescuer. Typically in these small maps, it's pretty optimal to not spawn the survivors in the corner. This pretty much designates that everybody will have an alternative area to kite to depending on where the hunter spawns, and this will make it so that the ciphers should not get disrupted too much whenever a survivor ends up getting downed, especially if they kind of stick to their respective corners that they have to kite to. So if the hunter kind of spawns in Graveyard, that Aeroplanus is going to kite towards Backgate and try to stay around there rather than transitioning inwards and disrupting the decoding. If they end up needing to go down to Graveyard, again, kind of same scenario, you kind of stick around there. If you end up going for the Lawyer is able to have pretty much the whole broken side of the map, because you're typically not going to spawn survivors there. And it's just about, a lot of times it's going to be what assist character you decide to put in the middle.
That. Hold on. Let me look at. Oh. Well. It did look like we got an Acrobat ban, and I feel like that's really strong because Acrobat exceeds in these types of maps, I feel. So Acrobat was an amazing band because I see some really good Acrobat plays on Red Church.
And they decide that they're going to lock in the forward here. This is kind of a little bit different than what I was expecting, but I think it's perfectly reasonable whenever you need to get a win. So forward can be used to assist, but also can be used to... It was used a lot when Sculptor was meta, because of the fact that he would be able to stun on chair, and you wouldn't have to risk feeding the Sculptor as much presence if you end up going for a really long stun on chair. Does maybe slightly lead into perhaps the hunter will be slightly baited into bringing excitement just to counter that, but I think it's a very reasonable pick when you need to go for a win. And so in this case, you might actually spawn the Aeroplanist in the middle, and then that forward kind of spawns where I was talking about Aeroplanist might spawn before. And you pretty much force the hunter into chasing the Lawyer, but again, the Lawyer can rotate, the Lawyer can see where the hunter is coming from and maybe hide it accordingly. It'll be very interesting to see what hunter Zach decides to go against to kind of counter this comp, because I think this is a comp that is both decent against Sculptor and decent against Geisha. So it'll be interesting to see if maybe we see something different coming into round one here. Anything else you'd like to add there?
Generally, I feel like another thing about forward that might be a really good pick, especially on Red Church. Usually forward players have very good turning mechanics, like they know how to turn really well, they know how to play him, of course. And Red Church tends to have a lot of walls and less open areas. So I feel like it would be easier for the forward to get their stuns off. And Gala is somewhat weak whenever she has to keep on going back and chasing serves. and not have someone on chair so she can just pressure her side and everything else that's going on.
Yeah, so we end up seeing that Gamekeeper is actually the hunter that's locked here, and this is actually a very strong matchup against this comp. Gamekeeper has been very trendy nowadays to go for, and I think it's very strong against this particular comp because this is a very, very kind of transition-oriented comp. So Gamekeeper ends up countering forward because his harassment doesn't really work super well against him because of the fact that he can place down a trap and you can't actually stun off the balloon rescue. And Gamekeeper is actually deceptively really, really strong against Gamekeeper or Gravekeeper. The Gamekeeper, Gravekeeper, that's going to confuse me so much throughout this matchup. But if Gamekeeper with an M ends up getting a hook against Gravekeeper with the shovel, the V, if you end up getting that hook on the dig, it actually pulls them out of the dig. And that can actually be quite a strong counter to his ability, especially being that Gravekeeper only gets 2 shovels per matchup. And for it, he gets somewhat significant decoding debuff. But yeah, Gravekeeper is somewhat of an even matchup with Aeroplanist, but I think against this matchup, especially if the Gamekeeper is able to snipe out where Lawyer is at early, the Gamekeeper has potential to put a lot of pressure on this Survivor comp really early.
Generally, Gamekeeper is counter somewhat to Gravekeeper, but I also feel that Gravekeeper can somewhat actually counter Game. Because of the fact that, whenever Game is doing his hook things, he gets stuck in an animation and stands still for a little. And that's very valuable time, as we all know in this game. It takes like 5 seconds to get to a pallet. So I feel like if Grave is able to stay behind walls and generally avoid the hook and use shovel as a body block for the hook, if Grave is possibly chased, we might see an amazing kite here.
And we're going to see a somewhat different spawn setup than what I was kind of expecting here, but I think it ends up paying off being that the Gamekeeper is going to spawn in the middle broken area. I believe this blocks off the back gate cipher, if I'm not mistaken. So we're going to see the Lawyer is going to have to really avoid the Hunter here in the early game, and I believe that the Gamekeeper is probably going to try to go to middle first from here. And this is somewhat of an unorthodox first spawn setup, but I think it does have some reasonable merit to this team comp here. And we're going to see perhaps some trap setup early, and we're going to see, yeah, once again, as I kind of predicted, we were going to see that transition through the middle here. And this will mean that the Aeroplanist will be receiving the first kite. Such an early hook. That hitbox right there. Using a jetpack and still getting hit for it, and we're going to be transitioning right to the graveyard. And it looks like Graveyard Cipher was actually locked, so Aeroplanist will be able to work with this for a little while. Anything else you'd like to add here?
Yeah. Um, Generally, I think we might. I have faith in. Oh, that's what I was worried about. I was going to say that I think we might have an early down here because this is a very closed off area, and Bane can apply a lot of pressure with the slowness,
Yeah, and this is
which
why we're
generally.
seeing Gamekeeper being a very, very strong matchup to Aeroplanist here. Even though Aeroplanist did have that transitioning potential, Gamekeeper, again, just so fast, being able to catch up to the Survivor, pull the Survivor back to him, and that leads to quite an early down here. We're going to see Gamekeeper place a trap on that Cypher, perhaps slowing down the decoding slightly, and we're going to see Father Milk is going for the rescue. Father Milk here ends up rescuing with no tide, but it's going to be enough because Aeroplanists will be making their way out of the area, needing to eat a hit here, which can somewhat be detrimental, being that uh, Gamekeeper does really want to get to max presence if he can. And we're going to see, once again, we're seeing very strong transitions here. Yeah, ends up getting that last hook just in time to catch up to the Survivor here. And we may see a blink come out here momentarily. Okay, not quite here, but we'll probably see it. Yeah, it comes out now. There it is. And now that's going to be one hit away from max presence. That was actually a beautiful rescue from Lawyer there. Not taking any hook damage there, being able to dodge that hook early, that's going to make it a lot easier in the end game because you're able to actually heal Lawyer up to full health, and Lawyer will not have to have a chip shot of damage. But I believe we are seeing the Gravekeeper will be going for the next rescue, and I think that's perfectly reasonable because the forward has wanted order, and you really need to make sure that you kind of catch up on these ciphers here. And we're going to see Gravekeeper approaching that rescue. Can't wait too long, especially against a Gamekeeper here. And we're going to see, will this... And we see, once again, pulls him out of the shovel, but does end up getting the rescue there.
That is good. Ooh. I don't generally think there was anything Gravekeeper really could have done in that situation, mostly.
Beautiful dodge of
Um,
the hook there. Stalling out
really
even just a
was.
little bit more time for the survivors. And the forward is actually here to harass. Now, being that they just used Blink, you know that the Gamekeeper doesn't actually have trait. And that's actually going to free the aeroplanist there. And that was actually a decent sized stun there. And forward is going to be here to continue harassing. The thing is, Gamekeeper will be able to place a trap. Multiple traps there, just for good measure. And we're going to see, once again, goes for the stun. Doesn't quite get it off, though. And that is going to eat another hit. But being that the Cypher is at around 50%, I don't know if they have an additional Cypher here. Let me check the setup. Yeah, they don't have another Cypher at the moment. The only other Cyphers are at Middle Church and Top Broken. And we're going to see, yeah, Father Milk is going to be starting a new Cypher at Top Broken. So the survivors are communicating, hey, pressure on me. I need to transition out of this area. And we're going to see perhaps the Gamekeeper will be able to pull out the Gravekeeper out of hook. And we're going to see that, and Gravekeeper will be transitioning into middle. Now we're going to see that this Gamekeeper will be very inclined to stay close to that Cypher there. I believe all of these survivors do have borrowed time, so I don't think we're going to see too many issues with not having borrowed time here. And almost gets the hit on Gravekeeper, though. That was a very, very close hit right there. And we're going to see a hook and a down right here. And now it's actually going to be very, very difficult to actually pull off this rescue. I believe that, yeah, Lawyer's Cypher is somewhat close, but Ford's is nearly prime. So we're going to see the Lawyer try to transition for the rescue here. And yeah.
Ooh, I feel like maybe the forward should have won in, because that would have been more detrimental. Because Lawyer should have stayed at the Cypher, because Lawyer has a decoding buff, not to mention farther away, so game won't be changing targets to Lawyer, which is also a reason they could rescue, but also they could have had the Cypher Prime. Also, beautiful rescue from the Lawyer, as we see again, but it's going to be another down, which it's not looking too good for the serfs right now. But
And that
hopefully,
actually wasn't before, or wasn't after half. I wasn't double checking that. And it looks like Lawyer will be popping the Cypher. The survivors are just like, okay, we're not going to be able to get this rescue in time. Survivor is pretty much dead there. We're going to see if we can at least get one out here. And the forward, trying to transition through middle here, ended up rotating into the Gamekeeper by mistake. Ends up getting hit by the Gamekeeper. I don't remember if Sulfia was used here. I don't believe it was, so that
I
should
don't
still
think
be
they're
up.
gonna make it to the Gravekeeper. No, they didn't. And game is going to be going for Lawyer, as we see again. Lawyer immediately starts transitioning as to not be immediately overwhelmed by the Gamekeeper. And then
Oh, Father Milk was not able to dodge the hook. Father Milk has been downed. That was a very, very close hook there.
looking like a
But you can see
Forte.
that the lawyer was trying to run back and forth there, trying to dodge that hook, but unfortunately was not able to. And that will be a 4 survivor elimination. CCB is having a very dominant start here, and now if you're the BS survivors, what you want to do is you want to you want to try to pull it into a round 3 by winning this round here, because I mean it's very tough to come back on points when you're 7 points behind by the end of the first round. So you pretty much need to win both these next interactions here.
Yeah. Um, Generally, I honestly just don't. I have faith. I have faith in them, but it's not looking too good. But all I can do is have faith. I'm rooting.
Oh wait, it's best of 5. It's best of 5. That's my bad. I just got a DM. It is a best
Oh,
of 5, not a best of 3. So this is actually they can come back from this. They can come back from this. Okay, even though it's quite a lot of points to be behind on, when this is a big difference between BO3 and BO5. I'm so used to commentating BO3, I totally forgot that BO5 was even a factor. Yeah, so even though you lose the first round, there is a lot more comeback potential if you get a rough start, if you're able to pull things around in the later rounds. It'll be very interesting to see. Yeah, CCB is going to be banning a map. Moonlit has been banned. I think
my
what they want a lot more is if you're CCB, you want maps that have time mentalities. Now that you have so much, like such a strong kind of start here, you want to end up playing on maps that are similar to that. Hospital is the one that immediately comes to mind. Hospital is a map that is very, very tough for hunters to win on, which makes it so that a lot of times you can end up having very strong kind of scenarios where if both sides end up getting ties, nothing really changes, and you just end up being up around for essentially no difference by the round 2, which the more rounds that pass that you end up tying, if you have an early lead, you really want to see if you can kind of tie the next rounds as much as you can. Of course, win if you can take it, but tie is just as well if you are if you're CCB right now. Now, if you're BS, you want to pick maps like I mean, Moonlit is kind of the big one to think about, which was banned. But I think you can kind of go for, I believe Lakeside and Chinatown are kind of the two best contenders here for our next map. Oh, Leo's is another pick. Yeah, Leo's makes sense. Leo's is another one of those maps that, especially on the Survivor side, can be a bit tricky. But also, there's some special tricks to playing Hunter on this map as well that can sometimes lead to some very difficult positions here. And we're going to see CCB is going to be picking the faction. Now, if you're a CCB, a lot of times what you want to do is you want to have your survivors go first so that your hunter knows exactly what they have to work for to tie around. So I will probably expect to see, but then again, teams have alternative strategies that they kind of go with in situations like this. So it's really kind of team's choice what they want to do. It's also whether you want to let your survivors kind of have like a little bit of a break, or whether you want your hunter to have a break. But again, when BS ends up picking picking their map, a lot of times they have specific prep that they're kind of going into this with that they might not have necessarily been so prepared for on Red Church. And CCB actually wants to hunt first, and I believe that this is actually going to be very strong because when you have survivors that end up losing a round 1, if you can push them into the next round as fast as you can, it ends up sometimes being a little bit of a mind game because a lot of times survivors can be somewhat, I call it kind of tilted from an earlier match. You kind of upset about like having such a dominant performance from the opposing team's hunter that ends up putting you in a difficult position. A lot of times it can be very difficult from a survivor mentality to sort of recalibrate going into round 2 without a break.
um, generally BS. I feel like in order to get a straight clean shot to be in the winning, it's gonna be a little stressful for them because that would be, if I'm not wrong, that'd be a 4 escape and a 4K from BS's survivors, and then a 4K from BS's hunters. So we might see a comeback here, but I don't know. Generally, though, it's like if what's it called? If it's looking like if CCB can just get like maybe even 1, 2, 3 points for each of these rounds. It's looking like they're just going to keep cutting ahead and ahead and ahead. And this might just end up as a loss for BS.
And I think we will expect to see on this map, BS will probably ban the gamekeeper here, being that it's just kind of a ban out of respect, being that you ended up just getting 4K by the gamekeeper. Unless you have a very specific strategy to kind of go into it, a lot of times you're going to want to ban a hunter. Priestess and seer have been banned, which are very typical on this map. The only thing is that if you're not playing Sangria, a lot of times this allows Toy on this map, which can be somewhat difficult. And yeah, out of respect, they're going to ban the gamekeeper as expected. And we're going to see the first two survivor picks. Some strong picks on this map. If you end up getting Toy Merchant here, Toy Merchant is very strong to spawn in middle with their catapults that allows other survivors to transition in well. Some other picks that are very, very strong. Patient is very good. Acrobat is very good on this map for very similar reasons. And Wildling, I believe, is kind of somewhat strong on this map if you end up kind of spawning him in the no man's land kind of area towards like that area that's in between Christmas Tree and Godkite. I kind of call it no man's land because it's very similar to that arms factory kind of area that we used to call it before that T wall was added in. But yeah, I think we're going to see. Yeah, Gamekeeper was banned, so it'll be very interesting to see what the survivors decide to go here. Whether they try to go for a more kind of consistent team comp, something that would be a bit more main prep, kind of going into this kind of matchup, or whether they'll decide to try to make up for some lost points and maybe go for some early round 2 aggression here.
Generally, it's looking like Patient and Psycho. This is Leo's, okay. So generally, it's looking like Patient and Psycho, and I've seen some very good Patient hooks and then Psycho. I forgot what the talent is called that allows them to dash to each other. But if for example, Psycho was first chase and
Yeah, like the lower dash, yeah.
And then Patient hooked, and then they were able to get that dash off, that would be absolutely beautiful. And I feel like it might really help them to get this possible for escape, which is what I'm hoping to see a really big comeback because that domination really, really, really needs to be came back from. I feel like I'm rooting for BS. I'm here for you guys.
Yeah, so from here, we see that Patient and Psychologist have both been picked. Psychologist usually spawns around the shack area. You can spawn the Patient in the middle, and they have a very broken hook that they're able to get to Factory from like any position kind of surrounding there. They have the first officer, which is kind of, you usually put the rescuer in kind of that no man's land area, unless you kind of go for like kind of an off-brand kind of spawn setup. This is kind of typically the standard. And then I believe in this map, some strong kind of finishers here. If you end up getting the Acrobat, Acrobat can be a very strong survivor. I was going to say, yeah, Antiquarian can also be strong, and that is going to be the fourth survivor that they pick here. It's pretty much their choice whether they want to put the Antiquarian or Psychologist in Shack or Factory. But I think this is going to be a pretty self-explanatory setup, and it's all going to be about who Zach decides to go into this comp with. This can somewhat be a difficult comp to go into with a Sculptor. Being that there's an Antiquarian here, it's also somewhat difficult against Geisha, so I wonder if we're going to see maybe a surprise Hunter pick here as well.
Yeah, you covered everything I had to say.
All right, I guess I'll just keep going then. So the personas are going to be locked here. On this map, sometimes you want to have the patient to have broken windows here, because if the patient has broken windows, that factory kite ends up being significantly stronger because you have to kind of go through that god window through there, which can really help with the transition there. This is a map where you have to work on a lot of transitioning potential here. And if you're able to kind of rotate the hunter early, you can end up in a very good position, which is something that you're going to have to do if you end up going against the sculptor or the geisha. A lot of times, how you win against those hunters is with early game rotation. And we're actually going to see Disciple here. So Disciple is a character that has been somewhat trendy for a while. She's used a lot whenever you need to get a tie here. And on a map like Leo's is a map that can sometimes be very dynamic. This map can sometimes be somewhat difficult for Anne, but again, she's usually able to clutch up for the tie in the end. The only thing to kind of keep in mind is that Psychologist and Patient are both somewhat difficult early game chases, although Anne is very, very good against First Officer because of the fact that when she ends up getting a cat on the First Officer, even if he uses a pocket watch, the Anne can still see where their cat is. So essentially, First Officer does not remain hidden if he's within kind of the cat radius there. You can be stunned and be hit early. Even sometimes to the point where Anne can sometimes chase First Officer if they decide not to pocket watch early. But again, I don't think we would expect to see something like that, not at kind of the competitive setting. But I think we can probably expect to see some really good rotations. Anne is one of those characters that can sometimes get a little bit rotated. So it'll be interesting to see what type of build this hunter decides to go for. And kind of the standard tie build would be left down blink. That's kind of the standard if you're looking to tie with this character. And because of the fact that you end up getting that kind of cross ability, you're able to get a very, very consistent first down. If you want to go for a little bit more aggression, you can go up, down, teleport. And is warp allowed in this tournament? Because I have seen some Anns go for warp as well. Okay, gotcha. So no warp play, no warp play. That's all good. Those are kind of the main comps. Another one is you can go for the standard trump card detention setup. If you do that, you have blink, and it's pretty much the tried and true method. If you play Anne, that's going to be what you see the most. So I don't think it would be unreasonable for us to see that. The good thing about having Anne in this comp is that Anne can work really well against Antiquarian.
Mm-hmm. And if I'm not wrong, Anne counters 3 out of 4 of the people in this. Emil is the only person who counters Anne. So yeah, I guess that's just the
Patient is very solid against Anne just because he's a very strong transitioning character. But yeah, Antiquarian and First Officer can struggle against Anne quite a bit. The only thing is if Antiquarian is able to get her stick off a couple of times, it can buy out a lot of time in the early game. But again, with an Anne that really knows how to throw out their cats and use their dashes, it shouldn't be something that's too much to worry about. All right, and here we go into the matchup. So we're going to see Anne is going to throw out her cats here. Usually, if you're an Anne here, just to kind of minimize the amount that you get rotated, you want to take your first cat out right away and go for the dash there. This will get you close to the survivor and make it so it's not as easy to rotate. And we're going to see ends up splitting the cat a little bit too late, and that is going to essentially render the first cat useless. Now, this is the way that Anne kind of loses their winning chances. If they end up losing kind of their first cat while in combat, it's going to be very, very difficult to kind of make up from that. And we're going to see, this is one of the builds that I was kind of talking about. Up, down, teleport is something that is something that I had a very big arc when I was playing Anne. I played up, down, teleport a ton. I think it's one of those kind of, it's a very sure way to play on this map. And we're going to see, yeah, the callback of the cat, especially after she used her flywheel, she's not going to be able to use her stick anymore. And that's another reason why Anne is very good. But again, you're seeing the thing about up down teleport is this allows Anne after the first elimination to use that teleport to get to the next chase right away, which is usually why Anne kind of struggles for the win. So I believe that this gives the Anne somewhat the best chances for a winning setup here. And we're going to see first officer transition for the rescue. And ends up getting the hit early. This is actually going to allow the Anne to teleport to the chair and get not a stuff, but ends up missing the hit there, and that is going to be not quite a double hit. So excellent job on that first officer, still getting the rescue. Anne is going to go... Oh, ends up getting blocked by the wall there. That is something that can happen with Anne sometimes. And we're going to see maybe the Antiquarian is actually able to get away there. Which, if the Antiquarian is able to get away, then this becomes an advantageous situation for the survivors. As long as they're able to make their way to heal, which is what we see Father Milk is doing. Father Milk with the heal. We're going to see Patient is going to be the one that's going to have to go in for this rescue. But again, Anne is a character that's very, very tough to rescue from if you don't have a specific setup like rescue ability. And it looks like she actually kind of thinks that this is the rescue, but ends up Psychologist eats the hit there, but this is going to allow a free rescue. And First Officer is a character that can sometimes have a pretty decent setup against Anne. Although not now that he's been capped, he's not going to be able to use his pocket watch to its most effectiveness. Anne knew where the survivor was because of the fact that the cat is still visible and follows the first officer. So really, the watch probably should have been saved for the second rescue, or it should have been activated much earlier, so that would have been more difficult to kind of land the cat off there. But either way, we'll see if someone decides to rescue here. I won't be surprised if they decide to sell. Nobody's in the area. Teleport is up, so if Anne is able to teleport to the Antiquarian, I think that almost guarantees things to be locked down here. But now that there's Tinnitus, Anne is actually going to be changing targets to the Psychologist here, which I think is perfectly reasonable here. Is there... Yeah, there's going to be no flywheel there. Anything else you'd like to add from here? Alright. I'll just keep commentating from here then. And we're going to see actually a teleport right onto the patient here. Being that the cats were thrown out early, this is going to allow the Anne to have a dash, and that survivor maybe didn't know that the cats were deployed at that point, but the cooldown is going to be off in a second, and now Anne can go for the patient. Now she's going to be able to chase against everybody there. Oh, and ends up eating the second cat in the process, which is going to allow the Anne to potentially get another stun here. Excellent patience by this patient here, but ends up still getting dashed on anyways, and that will be a down on the patient with one set of cats there. That's going to be a very strong situation to be in if you are this Anne here. This is potentially winning, unless they are able to prime the Cypher. Let's check. What's the Cypher at? The Cypher is at around 60% now, which is somewhat reasonable. Antiquarian will have to go for an after half because of the fact that they are too far out to actually get that rescue there. Okay, yeah, I just got pinged. My co-host is back. And yeah, so Antiquarian, again, this is going to be a very tough rescue to go for. But I believe, yeah, Father Milk is standing next to the Prime Cypher. This is going to be, whether this makes this a tieable setup or whether this is going to be completely winning. Again, Anne does not want to take any of those hits. And yeah, that's going to be looking to be quite dominant setup here. And Antiquarian will be going down, so, and Psychologist is not within an area to rescue there. Now, it would be interesting to see whether this Anne decides to go for that teleport to go for the 4K, or if they will be happy with that 3K setup. If you're playing Anne, and you shoot for a time, you end up getting a win. Oh, ends up going for the teleport, but Psychologist is actually, I believe, within distance of actually getting that rescue off before elimination. So this will lead to 2 survivors standing. However, Zach will be right on their tails there. They will get the rescue, but it's still going to be very difficult to make it out alive.
It's looking like a 3K right now, from at least from this perspective. Yeah, and Auntie might possibly get to the dungeon if Auntie wants
I
to
believe
hide.
dungeon. Where is dungeon? Dungeon is. Oh, dungeon is Christmas tree. So that's not a very doable escape right there. Because of the fact that
Oh,
the hunter seas are in the
oh
distance. Yeah, this is
no.
going to be looking to be like a 4Kable setup here, and
It is
Antiquarian
looking like a
does have a little bit
4K.
of stick left. Let's see if she's able to last long enough to get to the dungeon. Transitioning to the dungeon area. Um,
Oh,
Ends up
Anna's
missing the caster.
afraid, it
Tries the
looks like.
flywheel, doesn't get the flywheel, but eats the stun instead, and that will be a 4 survivor elimination. Zach on a rampage now. This is going to be very, very difficult now that uh, BS's Hunter is pretty much going to have to 4K from here.
Yep, it's just looking generally like.
Yeah. In order to keep
It's really.
practical chances alive, this Hunter really does have to 4K. And it'll be interesting to see whether the survivors even ban the Sangria from here, because at the
It's
top level, if
generally.
you're.
It's
Yeah.
generally just looking horrible for BS. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a lot of dominance from CCB because right now they're really on a roll. But I hope BS will make a comeback. We'll see.
Yeah, it's going to be all down to the hunter here. The rounds will still go on even if BS ends up losing this round, but to keep practical chances alive, this hunter really needs to 4K from here.
Yeah. If this Hunter doesn't get a 4K here, BS will really be really behind on points. So it's going to look like
I mean,
very horrible for BS.
yeah, this is a really rough position to be in, especially because Anne is typically regarded to be a tie hunter. To get a 4 survivor elimination against a hunter that's typically regarded to be as a tie hunter, it's going to be very difficult for BS to kind of come back from here. Bittersweet, of course, and uh, yeah, it'll be interesting to see what kind of hunter they go for. And it'll also be interesting to see if the survivors even bother to ban Sangria, or if they allow the Sangria and be like, you know what, we 3K'd this Sangria, or we 3 escaped the Sangria on the first time, we might as well let you have it again. Especially because Church is a map that if you play Sangria on, typically the bet is you can get a 4K with Sangria here. But if you're not able to get that 4K, again, if you struggle to get the 4K on Red Church, Leo's is a lot of times an even more difficult map to get a 4K on with Sangria. So perhaps the survivors can be like, yeah, we can at least go for a tie here. There are a lot of comps that work to tie on Leo's. If you end up playing kind of safer comps, end up going for perhaps like a triple tied type setup. And I believe that there will be. We'll get
Generally,
started with the picks here momentarily, right? Yeah.
generally, it's honestly sangria, just in general, personal experience in seeing matches. Red Church is a horrible map to play sangria on, and so far, maybe just maybe. I think it's BS's turn to hunt, right? So I think if BS goes for Sangria, we could see a really, really nice 4K, which is what they need. And if they don't get that 4K, I really doubt that the chances are going to be very high for them.
Yeah, and we're going to see Patient and Aquarian actually getting banned here, which frees up the opportunities for both a Seer and a Priestess here. Priestess is somewhat good on this map at times. If you end up placing her in Factory, she does have some good portals if you're kind of booked up on those. And it'll be interesting to see. Do we have a Hunter ban here? Because they end up doing. Is it Hunter ban first and then they pick? Or is it. Yeah, it's Hunter ban first, so. They'll be, yeah. Um, the Hunter ban, I won't be surprised if they ban the Sangria, but again, they did so well against the Sangria during the first match with a somewhat off-meta comp. I won't be surprised if they end up going for kind of something similar again with, and usually in Leos you have kind of completely separate prep there to go against Sangria. You can even, I've seen some teams kind of even utilize the Explorer on a map like Leos. You spawn the Explorer in middle, and a lot of times the Hunter can struggle to even find where the Explorer is at. It's something that can be very, very difficult on this map. But we'll see what they decide to ban. I won't be surprised if they ban the Sangria, but if they go for something else, I think it's perfectly reasonable too.
Yeah. Generally, I feel like what they really need is if they can make up for the lack of assistance in kitings, then I feel like they should go for maybe, just maybe, a double decoder comp with maybe a really good harasser like Anti or Spectre, and then a rescuer. But
Anti has been banned, so we're not going to see Anti. Gamekeeper was also the ban, so I said they might go for kind of something different there. They're like, we're not scared of the Sangria. At the highest level, she sometimes ends up being a tie farm, and they ended up three escaping the Sangria during round one, so I don't think they're too particularly scared of it. But this does allow the first round Hunter to play their main, so I won't be surprised if we kind of see an anti-Sangria kind of setup from the survivors and a pick from the Hunter.
yeah. Well, it all comes down to what they choose, I guess. All I hope is that I hope that the underdogs make a comeback, but if they don't manage to get this 4K, then it really won't look good. But maybe CCB may make mistakes. Because I don't think throughout these matches we've seen many mistakes out of the CCB Surge or Hunter. So honestly, it's kind of looking really good for CCB. But if they make a few mistakes, then I feel like BS might really make a good comeback.
So we're going to see CCB lock in the first officer and Cord, which are two hunters that are part of many kind of counter comps for Sangria here. But coordinator and first officer, especially because I believe Mercenary is also global banned, you may struggle to not have any rescuers besides journalists kind of in later matchups. So we'll see if this kind of pays off for them. They're kind of putting all their eggs in one basket, locking in their first two rescuers here. But we'll see. They end up Psychologist is banned, which is perfectly reasonable on this map, especially if you're going to go against if you're going to play Sangria there. It's perfectly reasonable. Gardener is also global banned, so we may actually see one of the three I kind of expect to see. We're going to see perhaps Toy Merchant. Toy Merchant can be not so much against Sangria. Actually, scratch that. We might see Priestess. We might see Seer. Perfumer is actually something that's really strong against Sangria. And we might actually see an Acrobat. So there's a few kind of options that the survivors could kind of go for here.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that they can do. I'm rooting. I hope that they can really do this. But
They end up getting
whatever.
the Seer pick, which I was saying was one of the options that they could have gone for. Take the Seer, spawn them in Factory, and be like, Hunter, what you gonna do about it? We got a free body block, and you can't really chase us because it's Factory. And Sangria can sometimes be a very tough Hunter to chase with in Factory. They end up banning the Era, which is completely reasonable, but this may free up the survivors to have an Acrobat. So we'll see what they decide to do from here. They could play Journalist again and go for a triple rescue. That'd be kind of funny.
Oh my gosh, that'd be insane, but it might actually be good. They picked the rescuers with not much decoding debuff.
Yeah, I mean, they could go. They went Journalist round one. They went double Decoder and it paid off, or double Rescuer and it paid off. Might as well have one more Rescuer, just for the funny factor. For the funny factor, we're gonna touch on the old triple rescue meta. You're like, Hunter, what you gonna do about it? You're gonna chase our seer? Our seer's gonna kite. Seer's gonna kite. We're gonna put him in factory. What you gonna do about it? You know? Um, especially
Yeah.
seer can help out a lot with early game rotations because you can immediately see where the Sangria is going because you get like what 5 seconds of sight at the beginning of the match or something like that. Almost kind of that lawyer effect, and we're gonna see actually Barmaid. Seer Barmaid actually have really good synergy together, so I think this is completely reasonable. It's going to be a matter of where you decide to spawn the two on this map, though, primarily.
Yeah.
Anything else you'd like to add from there?
Generally, Seer, like you said, spawning him in factory is great, but I also feel like it's not only just about like where you place your Seer. It's the fact that since Sangria is such a fast hunter, her and Seer are gonna be in close proximity if she decides to go for him for long periods of time, and that's just basically a free owl.
I know if
So I
I
feel
was
like
going against this
Seer,
comp, I'd be inclined to play something like Sculptor here, just because
yeah,
chip hunters do tend to have somewhat decent performance against both Seer and Barmaid, but again, it's going to be up to what this hunter knows here. Again, I won't be totally surprised if we see a rerun of the Sangria during round 1, but I do believe that will benefit the survivors if they kind of opt to go for that, just because it can almost be somewhat seen as a bit of an open matchup, and being that you ended up losing with Sangria on Church, winning with Sangria on Leo's memory is like 10 times more difficult with her. Church is typically the hunter that you're like, okay, hunter, just win round 1, just win round 1. If we can get a tie and you just win round 1, we can be fine.
the
But and Leo's
yeah,
can sometimes be difficult to push for a win, especially with Hunter.
yeah. The specific thing here is Opera. Whenever you're like, I noticed this who's playing on Leo's, like whenever you're trying to go up the stairs, if you know what area I'm talking about, I don't know what it's called, but you know the big factory, and then the little window area. It's like she can't really shadow dash because she doesn't have any presence, and even if she does, there's sharp turns. So regardless, she doesn't get that much benefit out of it with the stairs and everything else going on. So she can become really, really slow, I feel like, in those areas. So I want
Yeah,
to.
on the second story of Factory.
Mm-hmm.
Right, that was the area you're talking about. Yeah, so what she has to do is she has to dash, swing to get out of her dash, and because the entire thing counts as one object, it's something that can be very difficult to catch up to a survivor with Sangria. It's like kind of her one slow area of the map, which is why I say if you can get your survivors up there, it's very difficult to catch up with Sangria, especially if you're at no presence, as you said.
Yeah. And the usage of the basic attack to get out of the dash mode also halts the hunter for a little bit, and then that Sangria has to turn and go back into Shadow Dash. So it's really tedious. So I don't think it's something some Sangrias do. I noticed that a lot actually just tend to go up the stairs, but since this is a tournament, hopefully Sangria will put in the extra work, extra
I'm
effort.
actually locking in the Hermit, which I think is perfectly reasonable here. Hermit sometimes
Wow.
can struggle against Barmaid, but against the rest of the comp is not too bad. Um, Hermit can be a hunter that you can play to push for a win, but he does end up being a high risk, high reward character. So we'll see how this kind of ends up for the hunter. If the survivors have really good rotations, if the Hermit decides to run a blink setup, it can be very difficult. But there's a variety of strategies you can play Hermit with. Uh, there are some strategies where I see where the Hermit actually doesn't connect any ciphers until they're first down, but those can sometimes be a bit more
Mhm.
cipher rushy setups. The issue is if you kind of connect all the ciphers at the beginning, a lot of times the first kite ends up being strong. And then sometimes I see hunters, if you look at UKJ, how he played in Koa, a lot of times what he would do is connect the ciphers, get kind of like a first hit, and then like disconnect the ciphers so that the survivor team can't actually change the polarity. and that can sometimes end up lead to a faster down. But again, it can be a somewhat Cypher Rushy setup, so it'll be. Well, we'll have to see what this Hunter has in store. It's not going to be easy, but if he ends up pulling it off, Hermit is one of those survivors that if he gets his first down and is able to get a lot of damage on the table all at the same time, Hermit can very well win here. But again, it's very difficult when you have a Seer, a Barmaid. You have all these characters that are very, very strong when it comes to survivability.
Hoping it's actually Insolence Hermit. Because something I noticed in those setups of Insolence Hermit is that Insolence Hermit can somewhat actually excel in these situations where he's against people who can either block hits or res hits, because he can just overall get presence faster. And along with Insolence, full presence Hermit can really be a nuisance, and just it can really hurt to see.
Yeah, I mean, kind of the standard comp that a lot of Hermits will run would be kind of an up-down teleport thing. It's all about like kind of playing the slow game if you decide to kind of do that. There are a lot of different ways to play Hermit, honestly, both strategy-wise and gameplay, but also how you decide to set up your builds. But I would say kind of up-down teleport does end up being kind of one of the more common ones. But again, teleport is typically kind of the trait that you run on this guy, whether you decide to do left down, right down, up down. It all kind of leads to a little bit of the same thing. I think we can expect to see a relatively longer first kite, especially in kind of this particular team setup, but it can also be if the Hermit is able to get an early game lead, he is one of those hunters that if you ever hear the term snowballing, that's where that kind of comes from. So there are a few different ways the Hermit can spawn. One of them could be where the Ann kind of spawned in the last matchup. And that's actually what we're going to see here, so I'm not even going to commentate the other possible spawns. But yeah, so what this does here is this gives the Hermit a variety of starting targets that you can go to. Seer is the one that you're going to go to first if you can get it, but sometimes Seer can rotate into Factory. And we'll see if the other survivors also touch their ciphers to start, because if they touch their ciphers, they all end up getting charges, which is something to switch to.
Maybe First Officer, actually. Because First Officer can actually he can't avoid Hermit really, because like with Anne, you can see the what's it called again? You can see the polarity on First Officer, so he can be a really, really easy target. And I feel like, well, obviously he's not first chase, but I also do feel like it would have been a good idea to chase First Officer without connecting any ciphers at all. But
So we are
Cord,
seeing that influence setup, like you suggested we might see. Ends up going for the blue polarity. The survivors do have a few seconds before they'll actually be able to change that. Coordinator does end up getting a really nice vault there, but there will be a stun here momentarily. Ends up getting a very nice Seer Owl there. And now the survivors will be able to change polarity.
Insolence.
Okay, they end up letting the coordinator eat the entire polarity there. And there is teleport there. There's also a gun.
Yeah,
He has a
and
gun.
ciphers look really, really full right now. Obviously, because it's Hermit, Alvin, etc., whatever people call them. But yeah,
And the
it
gun is
is
going to come out
looking.
there, which is going to make the coordinator become a very fragile survivor right now. But it is reasonable. I was going to say the hunter will probably teleport here. I was just in the mid-process of saying that's definitely possible. And now this is actually a pretty decent chase for the Hermit here, because of the fact that, I mean, yes, Barmaid can drink here,
Max
but
presence.
not quite. Not quite max presence yet. Close, but not quite. Barmaid will be able to get this drink off here, but it's going to be very difficult because she won't be uninjured. It'll be very difficult to actually get the next drink off. Ends up missing that polarity.
I think it was just too quick. That's the reason Alpha missed. But Max presence is also great for him, so I'd be glad to see that. But it's also looking like a cipher rush, kind of at this
Yeah, and it
point.
looks like ends up getting somewhat of a slow speed boost there, and Barmaid will be taking another hit, and this is where Hermit ends up being very dominant if you decide to go with this connecting ciphers right away mentality, because now you're going to have so much damage on the table. The first officer has managed to avoid getting a charge somehow this entire time, so he will probably be the next rescue, but yeah, this will be a down on the Barmaid there.
Yeah, that was just it was beautiful. And from here, because of damage calculations, I don't think even if Cord get healed, she can rescue because Alva does extra damage. We see a teleport, I guess, get dished out here. And it's on Cord, who's a very weak survivor right now. So that's actually great.
Ends up getting
If
mind gamed around this wall slightly, but ends up getting the dash. That's an excellent dash right there, and that's what you want to see from this hunter.
before Barmaid can even get rescued. So this looks like a lot of cipher pressure being applied currently. And that's great. Now
Yeah,
it's just Alva and first officer, I guess.
the thing to keep in mind is even though there are 3 ciphers remaining, Moongate cipher is almost done. Middle has about 50% progress, and this cipher that they're currently on at Godkite is also almost completely finished. So it looks like we're going to see a potential target swap here.
I don't think Alva should have swapped targets. Instead, just inflicted Barmaid with the red polarity and then her, which in turn would have got the double hit or maybe whatever he was going for.
Yeah, the difficult thing here with playing Hermit is if you don't switch targets, you really need to go for a 4-man or no-man mentality here, because of the fact that that's what you need to do just to tie the round. The survivors are healing up, trying to play a slow game here, which I think is completely reasonable here. And it looks like we have our next chase potentially. Coordinator is making their way in for the rescue. Ends up getting the snipe from way across the map. That's nuts right there. Okay, nice flywheel there. And the coordinator will not be stuffed there. Which, if coordinator had been stuffed, that would lead to
Uh,
kind of more
but at the
issues there.
same
But
time,
coordinator did get rescued before half, which means that they will be able to go for another rescue here.
the coding is
Ends
great unless we see a teleport here.
up
Not
teleporting on nobody's cipher there. It was middle that was the one that had progress, and that's kind of the difficult thing with not kind of making those mental notes about where the decoding was, while you had the opportunities while you were kind of waiting on share. Seer will be eating another hit. Again, that damage gets dispersed.
the
And
angle
middle is
at
very, very
which
close to popping, so even if you leave right here, a survivor can go to middle, prime that up relatively easily. It is very difficult to prime a cipher against a hermit. That's the one thing I will say. You have to prime it way more than you think you need to. But oh, Seer actually didn't have borrow time there, so
that
yeah,
must have
Seer
been
is
why
going to
they
be going
popped.
down here.
I
But
feel
again,
like
it's a
as
very
soon as
difficult setup when you need to get that 4K here, and especially because the Seer hasn't sat on the chair yet, and there are no kind of jump dashes left on this hermit for another 20 seconds. They will be
I'm
able
not
to get
aware
their
if
stage
Seer
here.
has an owl in question. Oh no, Seer doesn't. Because I was just about to say, as soon as you see that little blue outline or whatever it is, and you're dropping the pallet, I feel like he should have just owled. Because it's almost an instant.
The Seer didn't have any owls. He used it in the early game. And
Yeah,
first officer emoting in the gate and ending up turning what would have been a 4 survivor escape. Oh, that was crazy. What
okay.
happened?
Guys, this is the reason you don't flop everybody. Don't gateway. It doesn't
Not against
work.
a hermit. There are hunters you can do that against, but hermit is not one of them. I
Yeah.
repeat, hermit is not one of them.
Number one reason I love playing Hermit, gatewaiters.
Oh, but teleporting back to the chair and no one's there. They can decode the gate for free now. And actually, Seer can make their way to the dungeon. So this should still be a 3 escape, but it very well could have been a 4 escape if the first officer had just left. They also could have popped Pocket Watch, and that would have given them a free Tide Turner to escape. There were multiple options that this ending could have been avoided, and actually could have been a 4 survivor escape, but because of kind of waiting at the gate here, it's going to be a 3 survivor elimination as opposed to a 4 survivor, or 3 survivor escape as opposed to a 4 survivor escape. Still leaving CCB at a very dominant lead right here.
Yeah. Looks like there were consequences to the action of emoting. You're right. He really should have just popped the watch. Because that was so dangerous. Hermit's such a good person at getting gate waiters. So I just feel like leaving would have been way better. Just way better.
Alright, so now we are going to be going into round 3. If CCB wins this next round, that will be the end of the best of 5. So BS needs to at least tie this matchup in order to keep going. But yeah, so if you're a BS, you really need to kind of clutch up here. But all maps are back on the table. If you're BS here, you really want to get a map that you can tie on with your survivors. Got to give your hunters something to work with here. But again, even if you tie this matchup, it's going to be they definitely have a very tall hill to climb here. So it looks like, I believe BS said they might be subbing out one of their players here. So we'll see. We'll see what happens with that. In addition to, do they do another coin flip to determine maps and order? Does that happen now too, Ballsy? Okay, round. Okay, so that was, if I'm not mistaken, that was CCB, correct?
Mm-hmm. Wait. Mm. Yeah.
All
Mm-hmm.
right. It looks like they're switching out LX for Father Milk is going to be hunting, so we're gonna see that. I know Father Milk plays Gamekeeper, but Gamekeeper is gonna be banned. I don't believe I've seen Father Milk play many other hunters. Gamekeeper was kind of the main one that they kind of gone for, so it'll be interesting to kind of see what they go for. CCB is not having any subs. They're like, what we have is working here. We're gonna just continue to ride it out. They have such a dominant lead here, so even if things go wrong in the round 3, they have a lot. They have a 14-point lead, which is really insane in a best of 5 to try to come back from. So yeah, that's going to be 1 out of 2 subs for BS, and now yeah, CCB is going to pick the map, which means BS gets to ban a map. If you're looking for maps to ban, you probably want to avoid playing on Hospital again, or playing on Hospital, because Hospital is a tie, and BS really needs something that they can kind of win on. Yeah, it looks like there's going to be in a best of 5. Yeah.
Nope, yeah. 99998. Almost there.
Yeah. Just yes.
It won't be surprising if they decide to ban Red Church as well. The Red Church is one of those maps that can also lead to some very drawish setups. Which, if you're the hunter, you really need to be able to win for the team. And they actually end up banning Lakeside, which is really interesting here. Now, if you're CCB here, it'll be interesting to see who else they ban besides. Of course, they're going to ban Gamekeeper, because I believe that's the main one that I've seen Father Milk play in tourney. So we'll see what they decide to do from here. Yeah, I saw Father Milk play in another tourney, and they ran Patroller Gamekeeper. So we'll see if we see some Patroller picks here. I'm kind of trolling Father Milk here, but we'll see what they decide to go here. don't believe I've seen Father Milk play outside of a round 1, so this will be kind of a display as to what they'll play here if they don't have the gamekeeper on the table. Surely that's going to be a ban.
I'm still waiting for that thing that I hope it.
What's that? I didn't. All right, looks like they're locking in Darkwoods. Darkwoods, let's go.
Oh,
that's not legal.
Um,
That's not legal.
is that
What?
allowed, Flo?
No, it's not allowed in any tourney because they don't have the spawn select and it's not a ranked map. It does? Wait, I need to check this. That's crazy. Oh, you learn something new every day. I guess I need to play more customs. Darkwoods would be funny to commentate on. So, we got this shack here. You're gonna transition to the other shack area, and we're going to the tree. Okay, this tree is an area to kite at. You can interact with the tree. Okay. I'd just be making up call outs on the fly. That'd be so funny. Darkwoods is such a funny map.
We're on round 3, right?
Yeah, this is round 3. The score is 2-16 in CCB's favor. They've won the first 2 matchups. They're locking in Eversleeping. I think Eversleeping is a reasonable pick here, especially on this server. A lot of teams do have a lot of prep on Eversleeping. It tends to be a very common NAEU kind of selection. We don't see it too often in competitive play, kind of globally, but on this server, I've kind of noticed this server particularly likes Eversleeping as opposed to other servers. Unless you have, there are a few teams that have Mad Eyes mains, and of course, if you have a Mad Eyes, you want to pick Eversleeping as much as you can. Eversleeping or Church, those are kind of the 2 big ones. And it looks like BS is going to be playing Hunter. It looks like we're going to be seeing some Father Milk gameplay. So we're going to see what Father Milk is able to pull out here.
I'm hoping that. I want to see some Keegan or Yidra gameplay. Or Turk or
Gameplay. Sorry, I missed that again.
I said I want to see some Keegan or Yidra gameplay, which are Clerk and Dreamwitch.
Oh, okay. You were saying the character names. Okay, gotcha. Yeah. I mean, Clerk would be fun. If her name is Keegan. I just learned that. That's crazy. I can't believe I didn't know that already. Keegan. I'm gonna call Clerk Keegan from here on out. Thank you for that info. If you're playing on this map, or in this setup, you do need to go for something that's 4K or no K, and Dreamwitch and Clerk are definitely 2 of those hunters. It'll be a matter of whether BT ends up playing those hunters, though. And Seer and Anti are the first 2 that are banned. Gardener, Mercenary, First Officer, and Cord are the global ban. Yeah, and this is going to be the issue, is that you have, like, no rescuers. Okay, they banned Gamekeeper and Ripper. Alright, so I know that BT played Gamekeeper, but it'll be interesting to see if they end up... I didn't know if BT played Ripper, so we'll see. We'll see. Maybe the Ripper ban is insane, he says. That's crazy. Oh, that's fun. Hey, let's see some Mad Eyes gameplay.
Hmm?
I want to see some Mad Eyes gameplay. I want to see some Mad Eyes gaming.
I do too, honestly. Now I'm curious.
All right, let's see. Yeah, it's very tough to commentate what this is going to be. Because I don't believe I've seen BT play anybody other than Gamekeeper. But from the Survivor perspective, I mean, I expect the Survivors to kind of go something that's relatively safe on this this matchup. The Seer and Antiquarian are banned, which allows you to go Priestess or Toy Merchant, or both if you so feel like it. They both are very, very strong on this matchup. And they end up going for two very strong survivors right off the bat that end up eating the global bans quite nicely, which are Embalmer and Acrobat. Embalmer can rescue himself and is a very draw-oriented character, and Acrobat is a character that can be very, very strong, kind of kiting in, especially kind of the corner house area, I would kind of notice. Yeah, so they end up, Gravekeeper is banned. Interesting. So now they are going to be locking the next character here, and I won't be surprised if they end up trying to go for some rescuer here. They're pretty limited as to what rescuers they can still play. I think they still have Forward and Journalist on the table, but as far as other rescuers that they have, Wildling is sometimes playable on this map. I mean, we might see some Murrow gameplay. Okay, they lock in the Journalist, which was actually what they played earlier on, so I don't think that was too unexpected. I was just seeing what other options they would have. So Journalist is a very, very strong kind of later round pick if you know that you're not going to go against a Gamekeeper or... well, Journalist does have her matchups that she's very good against, but if this Hunter ends up having kind of some of the matchups that Journalist is very bad against, it can be very difficult. Okay, Priestess ban, Priestess ban, Priestess is very, very strong on this map. There are also a lot of double portals on this map, which is something that can be very interesting to see if the survivors know what they are, but again, we haven't seen Priestess this entire time. I wonder if the survivors actually have a Priestess player here, but again, it's kind of safe to ban her there, but they do have the option of having a Toy Merchant here if they want, I believe. I believe they also have the option of going Ento here too, which is what they did kind of in the earlier matchup. Okay, and looks like we will be transitioning commentators here. Again, my name's been Music Man, and yeah, it's been an honor being your host this far into the tourney. I think Lucy will be replacing me here, and yeah. Thanks for having me. Oh, I'm staying. Okay, never mind. Oh, that's so funny. Oh, no idea what was happening. Okay.
Okay. Bye, y'all. It was nice commentating for y'all. I hope it's a great tournament, and I hope y'all have a great day. Toodaloo.
All right. I'm still here. I will be commentating for you all. And
Yes.
I will be joined by Lucy here.
Yeah, hello, I'm Lucy. I apologize. I came late and I kicked poor Tomio.
No, you're all good. So to catch you up to speed, if you were watching the tournament before, CCB has a very dominant lead in this best of 5. They have won the first 2 rounds, and I believe the score is currently 16-2. So BS Bittersweet needs to really make a turnaround here, and they swapped out their hunter. They had Alex hunting the first 2 rounds. The survivors ended up getting 2-3 escapes on that hunter, and now they subbed out for BT, otherwise known in-game as Father Milk. And
Okay.
the character selection is going to be Embalmer, Acrobat, Journalist, and Cheerleader. And the hunter bans currently are Gamekeeper and Ripper, and so it will be interesting to see what Father Milk decides to play here.
Yeah, I think anybody that knows anybody that knows Father Milk knows that he is a diehard long-term gamekeeper like main. So I'm not surprised at all that that we're seeing a ban. The Ripper ban is a little weird. Even if
That's what
it's
I
a
was trying to
specialty
say. Yeah.
yeah, even if it's a specialty character, really, it's super super difficult to win with him or even draw at times. So I'm shocked to see that. Maybe his Ripper is just cracked and we don't know, but yeah. I am kind of excited to see the journalist pick. She just got a buff recently, I think. So she's actually like a lot more manageable. But I like her character. Not when I'm playing Hunter, but I like her character and her kit. And I'm excited that we get to see her legitimately used in a tournament for once.
Yeah, and we ended up seeing this team actually ran journalist round 1 and ended up getting a 3 escape against the when LX was playing Sangria there. So they did have some success earlier on with journalists. I think the reason why they picked journalists as opposed to the other characters is because all 3 Merc, First Officer, and Coordinator are all currently global banned now. So they were kind of getting down to the bottom of the barrel with the rescuers that they actually have remaining. But again, kind of in the later rounds, I believe that journalist does have some potential. If you don't have the option of having other rescuers, you can use journalist as a backup. The main weakness is that sometimes the hunter can be the hunter can actually chase a journalist, which is something that's a lot harder to do with some of the other rescuers.
I'm kind of curious, I guess, because journalist is a pretty hard counter to gamekeeper. So I'm curious as to why the journalist pick and the gamekeeper ban. If you're gonna ban gamekeeper, it leaves Wildling pretty open and safe. Wildling is like probably one of the better rescuers in the game right now. I would say he's relatively close with Merc just because you can't cut him off. And with Merc's recent like nerfs, it actually dropped his pick rate and his utility. You can't really abuse mercenaries. Ooh, a feaster. Is that what I just saw?
Ooh.
A feaster pick. I love feaster. I have never seen a feaster played like in recent times in a tournament. It's been a ridiculously long time since I've saw feaster. For those of you actually that don't know, a little Lucy dad lore. But I actually was on AO's bench back when I was like 16. That's Alpha and Omega with Roxanne actually. So that's kind of how I learned how to kite with was AO Roxanne. If you guys don't know him, he's a really old feaster main. Really good feaster. So I'm very partial to feaster. I'm super excited to see feaster played in this tournament.
Yeah, and I remember Roxon when he was playing at the time, he would go patrol or feaster, so we'll see if we see that come out now. It's been a long time since that meta. I think one of the only kind of main feaster players that I kind of see around every now and then would probably be, I know that Soul Candle plays feaster. Otherwise, we don't see him kind of come out too often. He's very tough in the early game to play, especially if you're kind of going against a cheerleader and acrobat. Those will likely be the first kites there. The thing about Embalmer is that you can make it so Feaster is primarily a campy type hunter, kind of almost like a lesser version of kind of what Bonbon does, a bit more kind of chase oriented, less campy, but again, still a campy hunter nonetheless, especially once he gets to max presence. The reason why Embalmer is very strong against him, though, is that in the case that he gets down first, he can just kind of rescue himself, and again, that stalls out a lot more time, especially if the survivors are able to get kind of an early kind of kite here. But if you are going to run Feaster, there are a few options for builds that you can do. You can do the left-right blink is kind of the standard. I mean, if you want to go really aggressive, up-down teleport can also be playable. Or if you want to go with the Roxanne style, you can go down right, and then you run Patroller there. Kind of silly because you're able to get kind of the stun on the survivors, and what you can do with that stun is you can end up getting one of the tentacle hits and follow it immediately with a regular hit, because Feaster does have quite a decent charge hitbox if you're able to hit it.
I will say, knowing that this feaster needs a needs a win here, I would assume it's going to be the teleport build. That's what I was going to mention before, so you beat me to it. I'm assuming with the Embomber pick and the Feaster on a map like this, it's not a small map. It's not the smallest map, rather. It's not too big, but it's still big enough that you're definitely going to want some sort of teleport. Warp isn't available. Normally you'd want Warp. Warp is a really hard counter to Embomber, but yeah, I mean, I'm kind of excited to see what use Father Milk gets out of this Feaster here. We are going to see the spawns. Embomber is going to go corner house. Cheerleader is going to go top right, kind of on a graveyard dungeon spawn. Middle 2 story is going to be acrobat, and then the journalist is going to be bottom mid in fake it.
Yeah, and this is going to be quite an unorthodox spawn, which is something that you actually allow the hunter to spawn middle, which is where you usually put your rescuer. But I think the benefits of this is that each survivor kind of has their own area that they're. Okay, we see a pause. Maybe it's going to be a restart.
Yeah, I would assume it's going to be a restart. Like, the cons don't really. The cons far outweigh the pros of not spawning middle. You're not on the middle cipher immediately, and you're giving a large amount of map control from like the beginning of the game at that point. Because like the big issue is like you're not on the middle cipher, you can't get it done, right? So then when you pop all your ciphers, one of your last 2 ciphers is going to be middle and something else. So it's going to be really easy for the Feaster to pressure both middle and one of the off ciphers. They are requesting a restart for spawns. Not surprised at all here. Not
Yeah.
surprised at all.
Perhaps they ended up all clicking ready a little bit too early before they had everything kind of set up. It looked like they were going to go kind of a somewhat normal spawn, and then things got switched up last second. I think it makes sense to have the Embalmer spawn in the corner house, so they force the Feaster to go against one of these stronger transitional kiters. But again, we'll probably see the journalist spawn middle, and then wherever they decide to put their acrobat or cheerleader is kind of mostly survivor preference. Looks like they're... Yeah, we're going to see a restart. Here it is. Okay. Sweet. That's a 4 survivor escape. I'm trolling around. I'm trolling around.
4 survivor escape, moving on to the next round. Even bigger lead now. This is why you don't play Feaster.
Let's see it.
I am genuinely really excited because I know that I know it's been a while since we've seen Feaster played in tournament play, and you don't see him too often in rank either. So I'm excited because Ever Sleeping isn't a terrible map for him either. Because those of you who don't know, outside of full presence, he actually needs to be able to see the tentacle to put it down on you. I feel like I feel like Feaster is really effective in rank because people don't really fully understand that that they need to see the tentacle in order to actually hit you. So I think the biggest fault that people have in rank is dodging a tentacle that somebody can't dodge. Well, they can't throw. So as long as this team avoids basically retreating from tentacles that aren't like quote unquote active, it's going to be really difficult for Father Milk to really get presence here early, especially since it's really easy to juke the tentacles, unfortunately. So I think that if he doesn't place these first few tentacles correctly and in a good spot and make some use out of it by way of presence, I think he's going to struggle very, very heavily. Feaster is sort of similar to Sculptor in that way. You have very limited resources in regards to your chase early game. So building presence off of those few tentacles or those few statues is essentially mandatory to get any sort of pressure on your early game.
Yeah, and especially another thing that Feaster sometimes struggles with when it comes to getting wins, he does tend to be somewhat tie oriented if he's not able to get too much off of his camp. If he gets his max presence, that's how he kind of wins. But in a meta nowadays, where in order to win, typically you need to have a lot of map pressure, Feaster is a hunter that's very low mobility, and because of the kind of low mobility, you can sometimes, even if you end up getting one elimination relatively early, a lot of times you can kind of get rotated on kind of like the next kite. And this is going to be probably probably like the second most common kind of spawn layout, I would say. The first most common would be it's like Embalmer spawn, like one to the left, but this is again very reasonable. You're going to have your Journalist having a very, very strong area, and then Acrobat can kind of go to Graveyard, and you don't really have a very easy first chase there as a Feaster. And we're going to get started with the matchup.
Alrighty, I am Lucy. This is Music Man, and we are your commentators for this third round for BS versus CCB. Headed straight for the Journalist, I believe. Journalist actually should be this Feaster's first chase. She feeds a ridiculous amount of presence, and she doesn't have the best like kite kit. So especially since Feaster can camp the pallets with the tentacles, the little boys are significantly less effective here.
Yeah,
See, this is that's what I mean by dodging tentacles that he can't exactly throw down at the time. He puts the tentacle down, the mind game works, the Journalist dodges it and kind of runs back into the Feaster here. But this is a big misstep from the Journalist here, giving up a really early hit though.
Yeah, there's still going to be quite a lot of potential here though if the Journalist is able to dodge this next tentacle here, ends up running out in the open, and ends up getting that blink with that extremely long charge hitbox. I believe Feaster isn't like the second longest charge hitbox in the game. Like he has a very
think
long
so,
charge
yeah.
hitbox.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
His charge attack is ridiculously long. That is actually a relatively okay down. The kite didn't seem as long. The only issue is they're being cheered on one of these hypers. So 2 are about to pop, one's at 50, and the cheerleader, I believe, is starting a brand new cipher at Fake 8.
And it's going to be the Embalmer that goes in for this rescue potentially. Which I believe... Okay. Nice flywheel there. If the if the Embalmer ended up going for that rescue, that would have been really nice because the Embalmer would have been able to mark down the Journalist, and that would have allowed him to get a coffin off. But now we're going to see a complete target swap. Now, Embalmer does still have coffin on himself, so even if he gets the down, there's only so much he actually gets out of it.
Yeah, that's kind of a big issue that I'm seeing here is you swap targets, but you're not swapping targets to somebody that you're going to chase for the rest of the game. And realistically, you've wasted Journalist items. You really have you're almost chasing a lucky guy at that point. But not only that, you're giving up a free rescue, which like you could argue that the target swap is your quote unquote pressure, but realistically, you're not applying any pressure and forcing them to heal, right? So not only does Feaster have no map pressure, Feaster's pressure specifically comes from damage spread. Kind of like not kind of like Hermit, but similar to Hermit in the aspect of you want people to be wounded, you want to stuff people, you want to look to hit people with tentacles that you like full presence. You want to make use of that stuff, but in a situation like this, Journalist again giving up another hit here, unfortunately missing the last of her pictures. But yeah, you need to build this presence early as gamekeeper, as Feaster, and unfortunately, giving up free rescue, amazing tentacle there. Giving up free rescues just isn't the way to do that. And he's a snowball character. You need to give him the opportunity to snowball here.
And with getting back on target with the Journalist there, suddenly this Feaster is in a decent position. Whether it's winning or tying, well, it still kind of remains to be seen. I don't think that the survivors will rescue this because a fully fed Feaster there is something that can be very, very scary here. Now, we do see that Feaster does have Blink there. There will be a Trump card, and as I said, yeah, that's going to be an option to get their kind of next chase there. Now, this Embalmer doesn't have self-heal. Excellent flywheel there. That Embalmer ends up getting down. We'll see if Feaster ends up forcing out the coffin here. And it looks like we will, and there is a potential swap with the Acrobat here that we might see happen, especially because of the fact that teleport has just been expended, which means that Embalmer will have will rescue himself for free there. So, and that's way out of radius. So I don't think Feaster has any other options besides to go for the Acrobat. Now, Acrobat is a very, very strong kiter against Feaster, just because of the fact that he can bomb away wherever they are kind of spawned, and especially being that he gets 3 bombs for free, and then has potential to gain 3 more. Of course, he gets another white bomb from decoding, another red bomb from kiting, and another black bomb from getting a rescue off. Excellent bomb by this Acrobat here, and that's going to make it so that the Feaster is not able to get any tentacles on the Survivor there. And again, we're seeing just the impact. I believe that his regular hitbox did get nerfed. It was a while ago, but it was nerfed from what it once was. He used to have a very decent regular hitbox, but again, it's slightly shorter now. Acrobat will be continuing on this kite in the graveyard, and the nice thing here is that the Acrobat will be getting downed in a corner, which will make it so that they are guaranteed. And it looks like the Cheerleader Cypher is primed. They will just pop it because of the fact that I believe the Embalmer would have been the only option to rescue, but he doesn't have borrow time. So Embalmer or Acrobat once again will be continuing this kite. Almost gets that hit off, but it looks like this will be. Yeah, you kind of have to go for that teleport when you're pretty much in essentially a 4-man or no-man position, and Cheerleader not actually going for the tram there, which is quite an interesting choice when you could have had so much kiting time for free. And yeah, it looks like that will be a down on the Cheerleader. So the Feaster may be able to clutch up for a tie here, give their survivors some chances during the next half of this round.
Yeah, we are seeing that gate just started, but I believe they have claustrophobia, and it is an Acrobat on the gate, so the gate is moving super, super slow here, and they're now chairing on the gate. The only saving grace here is Embalmer is playing in the middle, so they do have somebody going for the save, and I think Feaster is going to get one-track mind here, and they are going to be able to get that rescue off, and they are going to push the other gate. So essentially, they're hard locked. This Feaster is hard locked to a draw right now. He does not teleport up. Both these survivors are running to the opposite side of the map, and Acrobat is about to open the gate. Now Embalmer, now that he's on Embalmer, Embalmer's just gonna run like towards graveyard and die away from gates. Acrobat's gonna get the gate open. Cheerleader is gonna get her gate open, and it is gonna be a draw here, possibly more, because Embalmer does have flywheel still, so he is gonna be pushing for the dungeon. I don't think he's gonna be able to make it, but. Yeah, no dungeon. The gate isn't quite. Cheerleader's gate isn't quite open, but I mean, super smart by the Embalmer. They could have pushed gate. They could have tried to push for more, but they didn't want to risk the double down with the Acrobat. Detention is a very scary thing, and so is Feaster's charge attack hitbox. We are going to see Cheerleader get the gate open now, and like I said, it is going to be a hard lock draw. GG's to both sides.
Yeah, and so there were many key interactions there that were kind of essential to locking this Feaster in a draw. One of them would have been kind of that target swap that the Feaster had. Feaster is primarily a campy style hunter. Now, the way it kind of works when you're a camp style hunter, but you don't have very much map pressure, is a lot of times the survivors will opt to not rescue, keep your presence low. It's kind of the same style, again, as you kind of mentioned, kind of a similar gameplay style to what you would sometimes do against a sculptor. You want to keep their presence low, and that's one way to kind of force a draw. But when the Feaster gets over aggressive, to kind of switch targets, again, getting those rescues for free and healing up and forcing them to go for chase, which is not what you play Feaster for. Again, it really led to quite a nice display by the survivors, still being able to kind of clutch up for that tie.
Yeah, and that's kind of what we expect from Feaster. Unfortunately, Feaster is a super weak character in the meta right now. And like we talked about before, not giving up the free rescues, you're not really getting much pressure off of that, especially since you swap targets onto something like an Embalmer. There's no need for support or saving against an Embalmer. You can just kind of die in the corner and then wait for a coffin. So I just think I don't know. I think Feaster was a tough pick regardless. He got the draw, which is kind of what Feaster's hard luck to traditionally. So great job to Father Milk for that. But in a situation where you need a win here, you'd have to think that you'd go a hunter with a little more win potential than somebody like Feaster does.
Yeah. But now it's going to be all up to the survivors. If the survivors can win here, then they can potentially start to try to bring it back. But again, even if you get a 4 survivor escape here, if you don't win the next 2 rounds, like if one of the next rounds ends up becoming a tie, then CCB still ends up winning on points because there's no potential way to come back. So essentially, I believe that
It has to be a 3-man, correct? Or
they
will
have
they
to
lose?
get at least a tie to progress on to the next rounds. But
Well, because you said that I don't believe point wise they can come back if they tie. I think they need to win here. Oh yeah, 4-man. Yes. You're right. Yeah, so it needs to be at minimum a draw. Yeah, you're correct. You're correct. I'm sorry. I'm calling himbo for a reason, man. I don't specialize in thinking too hard. But no, I definitely think that the survivors have the ability to come back. I think it's it's going to be tough though, because I mean, it's really hard to keep good morale going when your team is struggling like this deep into the game. So I think as long as the survivors take a second, think about things. The meta is favored a little towards survivors. I definitely think a 3-man is possible, especially on Eversleeping. In my opinion, Eversleeping is a pretty even map for both factions. So the map really just favors whoever is currently playing the best at that time. So I definitely think it's a 3-man is possible on a map like this. You have more hunter bans, you're able to ban people that they're more confident with. So you're able to put yourself in the best possible position you can put yourself in. I will say that Zach plays a really good geisha, so I'm really hoping we see a geisha on Ever Sleeping here.
yeah, they end up banning the sculptor and the gamekeeper, which we saw sculptor and when Zach played in their previous matchup in the tournament, ended up having a very dominant display with some, I believe it was no detention sculptor gameplay, and ended up getting a really dominant position. But they ended up, yeah, again going really aggressive with the geisha, and I think in an area where you're kind of in this position where if you tie, it goes on to a next round, but even if you don't end up kind of tying here, and you end up getting the win kind of like secures it, but even if you get a tie, it's going to be very difficult for the other team to kind of come back from here. But you also have to think in second the second round of this matchup, they ended up actually getting 4 survivor eliminated by Zach's Ann on Leo's memory, and typically regarded Ann as also a strong matchup to play on Eversleeping as well. So I don't think it's impossible that we also see the Ann kind of come up here too.
Yeah, and I mean, over in the Chinese server DX, Duxwin, he actually he uses a lot of Ant, but he uses it on bigger maps and more open maps like this in Lakeside. And he has a playstyle that actually like he fishes for 3-mans. So if we do see an An, I'm going to be like pretty curious as to how Zach goes about playing this. Are you gonna play it super aggressive to try to end it here? Are you gonna be playing kind of conservatively just to win the long game? Because Anne realistically is one of those hunters. A lot of people say that she's super draw locked, and I guess she could be if you're not saving, but Anne also has a lot more map pressure potential than I think a lot of people give her credit for. So I think every time people play Anne specifically. I think it's more of a play style difference that kind of locks you into a hard draw than the hunter kit itself. I know our hunter on Envy uses Anne. I know you're an avid Anne main too, music. So maybe you will. Hopefully you will get to see your main here. So I know there's a lot of different play styles with Anne. She's super diverse. She was actually considered a meta trap for a while, so she's really good against all of the meta characters, even the ones that are in current meta right now. So now that you've said Anne, I kind of want to see the Anne more than Geisha music. Now you've got me excited. Music, if it's not an Anne, I'm gonna be upset at you.
Hey.
You got me excited now.
Hold up. Yeah, and in that matchup, they ended up going the up-down teleport, which was something that when I was kind of in my Anne arc, was something that I was running a lot because it's very secure on kind of the large maps. If you end up kind of struggling with one chase, you can kind of teleport and move around. But if you don't end up using it, it's very useful to make sure that you don't get rotated. If they decide to like not rescue against you, you have a very secure way to kind of initiate a second chase. And yeah, so I think we can probably expect to see if the Anne comes out, it's probably going to be that up-down teleport build. But on this map, I've also seen hunters play the standard downright trump card thing, and I don't think it's impossible. Wait, we see the Anne! I was right.
You're lucky. You're lucky, music. I'm so excited. I love Anne. Like I said, our Hunter DX. Yes, we have our own DX, but our Hunter DX plays Anne as well. I'm a huge Anne Geisha lover. I have a soft spot for both of them. So I'm super excited to see Anne being played here. Anne mains, the dashes are so satisfying to watch. They really are.
Yeah, and Anne is one of those characters. If you end up wanting to play a character that's like draw locked, I think the closest character you probably have to that would probably be Bloody Queen. If you really want to play a character that like really fights for a draw, and again, you can play for a win with Bloody Queen because you do have some map pressure, but she ends up being the character that's kind of the most kind of draw locked here. On Eversleeping, sometimes Bloody Queen struggles a little bit just because the buildings get in the way of where you want to place your mirrors. But again, she has a very strong time mentality. But I think that with Anne, the main struggles against this matchup will probably be the fact that Embalmer can rescue himself, can kind of get that. So even if you get the down on the Embalmer, he can resurrect himself, and you can first of all keep the Anne low on presence, which is big because Anne max presence does end up making your chase a bit more scary, especially at the late game. But I think it's interesting that we actually see a novelist here.
Yeah, I actually think the novelist is a good pick. If the moment you see cats, the moment you kind of want to double back a little bit, the moment they get close to you, you just swap. And you can avoid, at minimum, the no presence cats pretty easily. And then the aeroplanist, not the aeroplanist, rather, I'm sorry. The Merc is
Yeah.
the Merc is a good pick. The FO isn't as good of a pick here.
Yeah,
in a
first
situation,
officer,
yeah, a first officer is first off like first officer, isn't that good against Anne. The watch doesn't really get you much when you have a cat on you. So like the big issue here is this team needs a draw, but they would like to look for a win in a situation like this. But with two rescuers, your cipher progress is way too slow, I feel like. So it is going to be interesting to see how they play this dual rescuer comp here. I am Lucy. I'm joined by Music. We are your casters for the round 3, second half of BS and CCB.
yeah, we're going to see this Anne go straight to corner house here, going after the Embalmer. Now, the Embalmer placed his coffin. If you are the Embalmer here, what you want to do is, even if you go down early on a first kite, what you want to do is you want to get as far away from your coffin as possible. And we see this with the Embalmer transitioning all the way to Graveyard. Graveyard Cypher's locked, so it's completely free to kind of decode here. And actually, Survivor makes a very successful transition to this window, and I think that was quite a hard transition. It would have been very difficult for the Anne to actually cut him off there. And now Embalmer is kiting very well, leading her into the corner of the map, which is very, very important.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing that I'm kind of curious about, I guess, the transition is good, but you are gonna be like, you're gonna be dying towards, which I suppose Coffin, like you could use Coffin here, but if you can kite long enough, it's kind of preferred that you don't immediately use Coffin, because depending on how long this Embalmer is able to actually kite, and I don't think it's going to be very long, unfortunately. We are going to see the flywheel used. But yeah, traditionally, you know, you want to kite away from your Coffin, but you want to put yourself in a position where you can kite and possibly get rescued, so then you can save the Coffin for second rescue. It's really, it's very optimal, kind of in my opinion, to use it on the second rescue rather than the first, because that second rescue, you have your Merc come get the rescue. You know, you start your kite, you die further away than you normally would have. Then the Merc is able to full reset while your Coffin's going. It's just, I don't know. I feel like the Embalmer could have kited longer if they didn't force the rotation so aggressively. Oh, we are going to see a double stun here. Oh my god! Great camp from this Anne here. Immediately read down on the Embalmer here.
Because the Anne needs to go for a draw, she's more than happy to just... she could have gone for the double hit there on the Mercenary, but the fact that she ends up going for this hit on the Embalmer probably will be, yeah, fishing for max presence there. And now the Embalmer is going to use his Coffin on the second rescue, as you were suggesting that she might.
Yeah, I think this is the better play here, especially if this team's looking to lock it into a draw. The only issue is teleport is still active, and nobody rotated in for that Cypher. So we are going to see a pretty quick redown here, unfortunately. That kind of knocks the draw potential down a little bit, because we are down 2 full Cyphers here, and the Merc does need to heal here. So you're having to stop and heal the Mercenary, and if you don't, the Mercenary could be chased now, in my opinion. So they need to be careful with that. He doesn't have anything to help his chase. He only has 1 elbow pad. He has no kiting build, and it's full presence, and so that elbow pad isn't really going to get you too far. I definitely think healing is the best option here. You're already down on Cyphers. You need to prioritize, you know, survivability from all your survivors. Not gonna see the Novelist here. I think the Novelist... Yeah, see, and they're gonna find the Mercenary here. Mercenary is super chaseable in a situation like this, especially on Ever Sleeping. And he is going to kind of run into the Anne, not really knowing where she is. And this is what I mean, full presence. He has a cat on him, and yeah. Like, I don't know. I definitely think taking the time to stop and heal there is probably the best option for this team. You know, to maximize survivability from all your survivors, to get as much decoding done as you can in the meantime. But yeah, we are going to see last two Cyphers are being worked on. 1 in Graveyard, 1 in Islands, and the Novelist Father Milk has started a 6th Cypher at Corner House here. So we do have all the Cyphers here. No one's going yet. There we go. The Novelist is going now. The Novelist needs to be careful. I think the Anne might have saw... No, nobody's going.
It's going to be an after half. Yeah.
Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if this was a... Yeah, this is a situation that they're kind of putting themselves into with this after half. Is oh, okay. The F4 got really lucky there, but I was gonna say that the poor situation they're kind of putting themselves into is Anne's win potential comes from cutting survivors off. So I think that was a little bit of a... It is gonna be primed. It was a little risky in my opinion, but oh my goodness.
And he ends up getting stunned.
Oh my goodness. See, this is what I mean. The full presence camp is ridiculous, you know. Her win potential comes from her camp, and I think, in my opinion, Anne has some of the most scariest camp in the entire game, including out of Bonbon. And Anne, and I mean, here, Zach's not even forced to teleport. Anne has so much map pressure potential. You're gonna see 2 dashes here, and he's gonna be right back in the middle of the map. And he gets the ping off of Cat.
now with the callback, Novelist isn't going to be able to even switch for 3 more seconds. Yeah.
And people wonder why I love watching and mains play. He should swap here. He should swap here. Yes. Big issue with Dash and Dead. Amazing job from Zach. I mean, this is textbook and you know, you have a somewhat decent early game. You really pick it up late. You really pick it up mid game because chases just don't last. Chases just don't last as long as you wish they do. And then, you know, late to end game is where you really pick up steam for your win potential here. And is easily one of the scariest campers in the game right now.
Yeah, and that will be congratulations to CCB having an absolutely dominant performance here, ending the best of 5 in 3 rounds, which is something that we don't always see all the time in tournaments. So excellent job, and that is going to be a win for CCB, 4 to 23 points, and that is going to be that's going to be a win on rounds there.
That is a hefty point difference. I think that just shows the dominance of CCB. And that's not to discredit BS at all. I mean, you saw their Hunter Father mode get a pretty dominant draw there. I unfortunately did miss the other rounds. But you know, honestly, I think this just speaks to how dominant of a hunter Zach is, and how consistent of a survivors that CCB actually has. So, honestly, great job from both sides. GG's to both sides. And I mean, if you're CCB, you have to sit back and wonder, you know, IVT, what's IVT looking like? If you're able to dominate a team like that that has honestly, I mean, LX is Raven's survivor, is Raven's main hunter. Yeah, they're main hunters. So, you know, if your survivors can compete like that against a hunter of that caliber, you know, maybe CCB is a team that we look out for in this upcoming IVT.
Yeah, I would agree. It was a completely dominant situation that CCB was able to put on BS there. And yeah, again, being that they were able to have, especially against the Sangria round was very insane, round 1. Being able to get the 3 survivor escape, going characters like having Journalist as the first chase against the Opera Singer round 1. It was an excellent showing from the survivor team, but also we have to give Zach some credit, having a full sweep of four survivor eliminations there. That definitely contributed a lot to this team as well. So it looks like they had a lot of coordination in this matchup, and I think it helped them lead up to this victory, having both a strong survivor roster and a very strong hunter roster.
Yeah, and consistency is kind of what we ask for here, you know. The survivor's doing a great job. You know, most times you do kind of see a team be traditionally more quote unquote carried. And you don't really see that in a you haven't really seen that in CCB. I mean, throughout the tournament, from what I've saw, it's CCB's survivors have been pretty consistent getting draws, and Zach has been pretty consistent making their points up, which is kind of how things have been in the recent meta with hunters. So yeah, I mean, great job from CCB again. GG's to BS, taking it to 3 rounds. So yeah, yeah, great job from both teams.
Yeah, and I've been your commentator. My name is Music Man. I'm joined here by Lucy, and we have been your commentators for the last matchup of CCB versus BS.
Yeah, yeah, I casted for 1 round, but thanks for having me. Yeah, GG's, and thank you, by the way. Before we do go, I hope you guys are able to sit back and thank Lolzy and Lily and all of the other tournament hosts, the staff, the VC mods, the other casters. You know, tournaments are very difficult to hold. So we want more of these community held tournaments. So make sure you show your appreciation towards Lolzy and Lilia for putting something like this together. Lolzy, Lilia, we do appreciate you guys. And thank you for letting us cast here today. Okay, that's all for me. Bye bye, guys. Bye, stream.